an intimate AirDoll comes to life and falls in love with a video rental shop clerk. One night, Hideo rides the train after work, then drops by a convenience store to pick up some essentials, including shampoo. When he gets home, he eats dinner in front of his intimate AirDoll, Nozomi, whom he speaks to as if she's a real person. Later that night, the man makes love to the doll in bed. The next day, Hideo heads out, leaving the doll in the house. Suddenly, Nozomi comes to life and slowly stretches her arms and legs. As she walks across the room, her shadow on the wall is noticeably translucent since she's full of air. By the window, she watches the water droplets fall onto her hand. Later, she tries on different outfits in front of the mirror, including a sequin two-piece that exposes the plug where a belly button would be. Eventually, she settles on a maid outfit hanging above the bed. Outside, a father chases down his daughter, Moe, to hand her a lunchbox, and Nozomi curiously observes the interaction. Then, she watches people place garbage bags in the designated area for pickup. The worker segregates the bags as either burnable or not burnable. Seconds later, Chiyoko, a widow who lives nearby, thanks the sanitation workers for their service. So the AirDoll follows the woman and copies her as she stops to thank every service or business she passes. By the road, Nozomi tails a group of preschoolers making their way to a park. A girl holds out her hand for the AirDoll to hold, but the child exclaims that she feels cold and pulls her hand back. After playing in the sandbox with the children for a bit, Nozomi passes Keiichi, an older man with an oxygen tank, sitting on a bench. The doll spends a few minutes on a building rooftop looking out and listening to the sights and sounds of the city. On her way home, the Cinema Circus video rental shop catches her eye. When she enters the establishment, she marvels at the rows of meticulously arranged DVDs and VHS tapes. Then, she sees Junichi manning the counter and the help wanted sign behind him. That evening, Hideo takes the doll to the park in a wheelchair. Nozomi pretends to be inanimate while with the man, but leans away when he tries to kiss her. The next day, Nozomi starts her job at the video rental shop, where Junichi and the shop owner are perplexed at how little she knows about movies. Later, Yoshiko passes by, and the doll sees the seams on her stockings that resemble the ones on her limbs, and thinks the woman is a doll as well. While she places DVDs on the shelves, a man peeps at her undergarments. In the restroom, Nozomi inspects the seams behind her legs, on her arms, and her neck. On her way home, the doll checks her list of movies for future viewing. By the roadside, she finds an apple by the garbage bags and wonders why anyone would throw away the perfectly edible fruit. In an unkept apartment, a woman scarfs down pizza and chugs a bottle of soda while seated on the floor. Later, Hideo bathes with Nozomi in the tub and asks if she noticed he used a new and more expensive shampoo on her hair. In bed, the man refills the doll with air using a pump connected to her belly button plug. While Hideo makes love to her, Nozomi realizes she'll always be an AirDoll in his eyes, meant only to fulfill his physical needs. The following day, the doll enters a makeup store, where the woman shows her how to apply concealer on her seams to hide them. Then she spends the rest of the day shopping for clothes, where an encounter with a mannequin intrigues her. At home, Nozomi tries on her new clothes and applies makeup on the seam on the side of her torso. The next day, she observes and copies Junichi while he cleans the DVDs. As she watches a pirate movie on TV, she mentions how she's never seen the ocean, which her coworker finds odd. So, after work, the pair spend a few hours on the beach, where the doll collects discarded soda bottles. She asks the man what getting old means, and he says it's when a person slowly loses their life. That evening, they have dinner at a restaurant, and Junichi points out that she hasn't touched her food. On the neighboring table, Moe brushes her doll's hair with a fork, prompting her father to ask what she's doing. The girl says she's just copying what Ariel did in a movie. Because her father told her to eat the carrots, Moe tosses the vegetable on the floor while he isn't looking and pretends to chew. Nozomi sees this, tosses the carrot on the floor, and pretends to chew. Then, the doll and the girl exchange knowing winks. Suddenly, a popping sound startles Nozomi, and her confusion continues when the waitstaff brings out a cake and sings Moe happy birthday. Junichi explains that a person celebrates the day they were born, and the doll curiously watches as the girl blows out her candles. After dinner, the pair strolls and the dandelions catch Nozomi's attention. Moments later, she spots her translucent shadow, so she walks behind the man so he doesn't see it. While waiting by the side of the road, Junichi asks Nozomi what else she'd like to know. She sketches him on the bus and says she'd like to know more about the coworker. In the apartment, the doll finds the box she came in and learns that she cost 5,980 yen. When she hears Hideo entering the apartment, she quickly removes her clothes and lies motionless in bed. The following day, Nozomi pumps herself with air before heading to work. In the video rental shop, Moe's father asks her for the movie, where a character named Ariel combs her hair with a fork. However, the doll has difficulty finding it, so Junichi tells the man it's the Little Mermaid. Then, policeman Todoroki asks for a movie suggestions with a corrupt cop main character. The doll isn't knowledgeable enough to answer, so the shop owner assists the customer. Later, Nozomi chases Yoshiko as the woman passes by the store and hands her concealer. The doll says she can use it to cover her lines, but Yoshiko thinks she's talking about the wrinkles on her face. That afternoon, Nozomi apologizes to her coworkers since there's still plenty she doesn't know about movies. After work, a mother takes her baby away when she sees the doll talking to it. Slightly embarrassed, Nozomi walks to a nearby bench and takes out her knitwork. She tells Keiichi, who's on the adjacent bench, that she's empty inside. However, the man thinks she's speaking metaphorically and says everyone feels the same way nowadays. Because of her conversation with the older man, Nozomi realized that people inherently need one another to lead fulfilling lives. However, because they aren't taught this fundamental need, humans lead scattered lives, seemingly unaware of each other's existence. At her job, Yoshiko watches a customer flirt with her pretty coworker, further making her aware of her fading youth. Meanwhile, Hideo has difficulty keeping track of his customers' orders in the restaurant, where he works as a waiter. The next day, Junichi quizzes Nozomi about movie trivia so she gets better at her job. While the doll tapes Christmas ornaments on the ceiling, she falls off the ladder and her wrist gets caught on the metal shelf, shocking her coworker. Quickly, he runs to grab the tape dispenser on the counter and closes the rip with the adhesive. Then, Junichi asks the doll where her plug is, and even though she's embarrassed, she tells him it's on her stomach. Without hesitation, the man blows into it and breathes life into Nozomi. When fully inflated, she sits back up and hugs Junichi gratefully. That night, the doll holds up her hand and watches the city lights permeate her translucent skin. The next day, Nozomi blows on the wind chimes hanging outside the window and is startled when it moves. Later, she places her pump in the garbage pile outside because she knows Junichi can breathe air into her if she needs it. Then, she returns to the apartment and lightly jumps off the floor to float up to the ceiling. Nozomi heads to an arcade where she plays games and takes pictures in a photo booth. After riding a ferry on the river, she buys a ring from a corner store. At the park, she sits beside Yoshiko on a bench and happily tells the woman that she'll get old just like everyone else. In the video rental shop, Nozomi is surprised when Junichi admits that he also feels empty inside sometimes, just like her. After work, the man takes the doll on a ride on his motorcycle. Then, they watch a movie in the theater where she rests her head on his shoulder. That night, Nozomi gently lifts the sleeping Hideo's arm off her so she can wash herself in the bathroom. The next day, Junichi takes the doll to his apartment and asks how she felt when the air left her body, and she says it was painful. While looking through his closet, she sees pictures of the man with a woman, making her sad. That evening, while on a bridge, Nozomi ruminates about the feeling of heartbreak. Meanwhile, Yoshiko speaks to her mother on the phone, who tells her not to worry about her coworker upstaging her at work. In the police station, Chiyoko says someone accused her of a crime, but Todoroki assures her they've arrested the suspect. In Hideo's apartment, Nozomi hides in a closet and overhears the man asking someone on the phone if they came by his home and threw the AirDoll out. Hideo doesn't seem bothered about losing the doll and mentions how its loss isn't a big deal. In her bedroom, Moen notices that her doll's battery is running low. Elsewhere, the peeping customer focuses a camera on his maid figurine. The slacker listens to her mother's voicemail message, who says she should just give the apples to her neighbors if she isn't going to eat them. The mother adds that she doesn't have to join the family business of growing the fruit, but encourages the woman to come home. At the restaurant, the chef admonishes Hideo for constantly getting their customers' orders wrong. Later, the man is at the video rental shop, and when Nozomi accommodates him at the counter, she hides her face, worried he might recognize her. After Hideo leaves, the shop owner says he knows the man is her boyfriend because he saw them at the park one night. He threatens to tell Junichi she's cheating unless she agrees to sleep with him. In the apartment, the doll hears Hideo singing happy birthday to someone also named Nozomi. Then she hears him making love and talking about the stars on the ceiling. While she knows he's in the bathroom, she sneaks out of the closet and finds another pleasure doll on the bed. Hideo is stunned when he sees the animated AirDoll. She asks him if she got the new Nozomi a cake for her birthday, but the man insists he did the same thing when he first got her. The doll says she knows she was named after his ex-girlfriend and is merely a substitute after the relationship ended. Nozomi asks why he chose her, but before he can answer, she realizes any doll would have sufficed for him. Seconds later, Hideo says he wishes she never got a heart and hopes she can return to being a doll. When she asks why, he explains that the whole point of having her was because he found human relationships annoying. Hurt, Nozomi runs away and Hideo searches the streets for the doll. That night, she dreams of herself drowning, but instead of the air bubbles coming from her nose and mouth, they escape from her stomach plug. The following day, Nozomi helps the bedridden Keiichi with his medication. The older man asks if she can touch him, and on instinct, the doll thinks he wants her to pleasure him. However, Keiichi points at his forehead, which she gently caresses. The old man likes that her hand is cold and mentions the saying, "People with cold hands have warm hearts," eliciting a smile from Nozomi. That evening, she visits the factory where she was made and meets the doll maker, Sonoda. The man welcomes her home, not at all surprised that one of his creations has come to life. In his workshop, he asks if she wishes she never found a heart, and she says having one has caused her nothing but pain. Later, Sonata shows her a pile of used AirDolls and says he can always tell if their owners love them or not. Nozomi asks what will happen to the dolls, and he says he throws them all away each spring. Then, the doll maker touches up the paint on her lips. Before she leaves, he asks if she ever saw anything in the world that was beautiful, and she affirms, to his relief. The next day, Nozomi tells Junichi she doesn't mind if she's a substitute for anyone, but the man argues that she isn't a substitute. Then, she offers to do anything he wants her to, since that's what she was created for. So, the man says he wants to let her air out. When he hears the concern in her voice, he promises to breathe into her like he did before. Eventually, they're on his bed, where the doll guides his hand onto her plug. He lets her air out, and Nozomi lays back on the bed as she deflates. Immediately, the man blows into her stomach to fill her with air, but instead of closing the plug, he lets her deflate again. Junichi repeats deflating and inflating the doll several times, which Nozomi doesn't seem to mind. Later, while the man sleeps, the doll sees the tape on her wrist and gets an idea. She takes a blade and a tape dispenser, incises Junichi's stomach where she thought his plug should be, and tries to close it with tape. However, the man bleeds profusely, and when she sees him struggling, she tries to blow air into his body through his mouth. The following day, Nozomi cradles Junichi's lifeless body in her arms and realizes she can't breathe her life into him. Later, she places his body in a garbage bag and leaves him outside the building for pickup. That afternoon, she sits on a bench with all the trinkets she's collected over the last few weeks laid out next to her. The following day, Nozomi removes the tape over the tear on her wrist and allows herself to deflate on the garbage pile. Moe finds the ring on Nozomi's finger and says she'll trade her doll for it. Eventually, she falls to her side as the air continues escaping her body. Then, the doll imagines all the people she met during her short life singing happy birthday, and Hideo presenting her with a cake. Touched by the gesture, Nozomi blows out the candles. In reality, she blew on the dandelion in front of her, and each papas floats toward the people who directly or indirectly affected the doll's short life.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.